Yeah. So, okay, so The Last of Us. So I know that you haven't seen the fourth episode, but I watched the fourth episode. But for today's purposes, we're kind of doing like a first quarter recap of what we've seen so far and like what we think, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so like my initial take is, and like I didn't play the video game, so I don't really have a stake in how true it is to the material of the game. I have heard that the first game is a lot different. I shouldn't say a lot different, but it's different from the second one. And people say that a lot of the thematic elements of this show are borrowed from the second game. So like some of those things, like and so like a lot of my critiques are just I'm looking at this purely from like, hey, I'm someone who has no familiarity. Like, what do I like and what do I dislike? So like I think some of the things that they've done really great. The set design has been really awesome. I feel like at least in 3 episodes I've watched, I haven't felt like it's losing steam or that like they don't have like episodes where nothing really happens. I mean, you could argue the third one maybe is kind of like that, but I actually think it told like kind of a cool story despite like some of the thematic elements of it. But overall, I'm enjoying the show. I think it took a turn where I thought it might go like full woke by the like going into the fourth episode, and I won't spoil anything because we're not going to talk about that. But I thoroughly enjoyed the show up to this point, and we could we'll dive into some like those particulars. But like overall, I've really enjoyed the journey thus far. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I haven't seen the fourth episode, obviously, and I never played the game either. So I'm not really judging it off like how does this compare to the game. I am just sort of judging it as any other zombie show because I watched The Walking Dead for I watched a lot of it. I wasn't watching it. I wasn't watching them when the episodes were live, but I caught up on like 4 seasons worth of stuff. But the problem that I've always seen with like shows like The Walking Dead, what loses me is when the drama takes control and you lose the zombies, and it's really just a drama happening with zombies. And there's not like a defining moment, like a jump in the shark moment or anything. But I just remember, I think I watched The Walking Dead and they were in the prison for so long. I ended up just losing interest. Like, it was just too long. Yeah. And so with The Last of Us, I mean, obviously we're 4 episodes in. I've only seen 3. The first 2 I thought were like excellent. I love the chaos of the world unfolding, and I loved like that 15-minute sequence, where from where he's carrying his daughter and being chased by the zombie through like that kitchen, and the zombie's just missing him every time. It's not like in other shows the zombie would just kind of never reach him, but I like what they did here was the zombies running so aggressively that it's actually missing the character just by chance, right? Like so out of control. Yeah. So I loved that because it's really high anxiety. I loved then the when a child dies in an episode, I had to say that means that a show no one is safe. Granted, it's based off a video game, so apparently I think they had to do that. It's kind of a big part of the story. But anytime something like that happens, you're like, all right, nobody is safe in this. They're not afraid to go very low. And then I loved the scene that was like one long take where they're in the truck, navigating in and out of the downtown, and then the plane crashes behind them, like as the crescendo of just a chaotic 20 minutes. Yeah. I really liked the entire show's general, like I like zombie shows, and when, whether it's like, some of the Korean, I've watched a few Korean movies and shows, they're really good. I like the zombie genre. You need to stay with the zombies though. You can't take it you can't take it too far. And that's why that 3rd episode made me a little nervous because it was an example of, it felt like a Walking Dead episode. It was just a drama it was a drama that was taking place while zombies were outside.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I don't like for a zombie show, because it really gets dialogue heavy. I need action. You know, I need some stimulation.
Yeah. So I agree. Yeah, like those first two episodes were incredibly intense. The action sequences were it definitely felt like by the third episode it had toned down a little bit because they're kicking off the story. That third episode, you were right. There was a significant portion of that episode. They're talking a little bit about like the whole Ellie and Joel. They're just sort of getting acquainted with each other, and then they introduce these other characters who happen to be gay. And I actually think that, like, putting that aside, I think they told like a really emotional, compelling story. The problem that I have with it is, like, in an age where a lot of these shows are so message heavy, I feel like I'm a little bit jaded. So when I saw that episode, I was like, oh fuck, like when it was like, there was the two gay characters, I was like, oh man, are we about to like make a turn to like a really woke show right now? And it had me concerned. Like, I think the episode was actually really good, but I was really concerned that it was just going to become this like kind of virtue signaling type of show. Because like also another thing that I've sort of, and this is kind of getting into like my critiques, are Ellie is, for lack of a better term, sort of like a Mary Sue, in that she is this character that is just good at everything. She knows how to crack codes. Again, not spoiling anything from episode 4. She's highly confident, highly competent, and I feel like a lot is lost in her character as like a vulnerable. Like, you want to see her be more of a vulnerable person. I can understand the argument of, hey, she's like sort of hardened by this world she's grown up in. But I think they're giving her, I think that at least initially they've given her too much grit and too much confidence. And I think in some of these moments where they're supposed to be emotional, her reaction has sometimes been like, oh, like this doesn't bother me, or like, all right, let's move on, and like, let's keep moving, or like she just makes these comments that are like, it's like, are you, like, that's not how a little girl would probably react in like a violent scenario. You'd probably be freaking the fuck out. Pardon my language. Right. So like those are some of the things where I was like, okay, like they have strong female character. We have the gay couple. Is this show about to make a 180 and just go downhill immediately? So I'm cautiously optimistic, because I'm still enjoying the show. Going back to what you said though about Walking Dead, because I watched a good portion of Walking Dead until I just couldn't watch it anymore. I think I skipped through most of season 2, which happened on the farm. I think it was season 2, where they're on like a farm and it's like there's no zombies and there's just like they're just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, I barely even remember.
Yeah, I barely remember too. But yeah, they go to the prison, and so like I think that's the challenge though with these zombie shows, is that they they're expensive to have like all these zombies where you're like set pieces and killing people, and you have to have moments where they slow down because you want to get more invested in the characters. And I think that's a good thing to do, to kind of take a break from time to time. But yeah, I just don't want it to fall into this trap of where it's like, hey, like we found this hideout, we're gonna spend a season developing characters and just hiding out in a quarantine zone or being really safe. I think if this show can really toe the line of just keeping everybody uncomfortable by keeping them moving and never really affording them the opportunity to feel like, to give the audience the opportunity to feel comfortable, like they're in a situation where they're out of danger. Right. I think that's where they're really going to succeed. And I think, again, if they stay away from the message of, like like female empowerment, all that stuff, if they want to keep people on, they really need to like tread lightly on that stuff. But yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think to say that they should tread lightly, it seems like they just totally, disregarded any of that, even, that mindset, because the fact that they took the third episode and made it what it was, which was like, honestly, the episode was fine. Like, I'm enjoying it while I'm watching it. I liked the elements of this guy who has had all this time to just fortify his place. I like that, like it was cool, and it was kind of interesting seeing him with someone else who wanted to like use the resources differently, right? Like they're fighting over, I want to make the neighborhood look nice. Like, it was interesting because I guess, you think about that, like you have one guy who's like the hyper rational sort of survivalist, and the other person who's a little bit more like creative, wants to make it look nice. And they have a pretty safe thing going on. So it's like, hey, you know what? In a zombie apocalypse, if you're safe, like why not still make things look good, instead of just all ran down.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting kind of exploration, but I just didn't need the whole gay storyline. I just thought it was like, where's this going? Now, if there's something else, and by the way, to be clear, I would have thought it was a throwaway episode too if it were just a guy and a woman too. Like, it's just, I don't like it if it's not actually doing anything to progress the overall storyline. Now, it maybe down the line we figure out that it actually does. So I don't know, but like right now it just seems like a total, digression onto just, here's a random love story. And I think the fact that they were gay was sort of a wink and a nod, like it's kind of woke, So that kind of bothered me, just that like they threw it in there and they threw it in there to virtue signal, and it didn't add to the storyline, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if it doesn't add to the storyline. Don't go above and beyond to sort of like virtue signal on top of that, because it just kind of bothers me in general. But the other thing is just about like the characters. I think that the woman too, like the young girl, the thing that bothers me about her now that we're talking about it is she can be hardened because of the world that she grew up in. I get that, right? Like that's her character, hardened, but I don't think it makes sense that if that was really the world you grew up in, and this is to your point, like you would be hardened, but when you're with a hardened guy, like Pedro Pascal, like he's if she's hardened, so is he. One of them doesn't make sense, and I think it's her. Because if she's going to be that hardened, he would be significantly more hardened.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's the case, either it's not displayed properly or they just don't behave like that. She seems a lot more like, cutthroat almost than him. Mm-hmm. And that's what just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you think she would probably be terrified of him. If that's how she was acting, you think she'd be terrified of a guy, and you would not be so bold to this person, right? Like to this stranger who kills people, and is like literally an enemy of that Fedra, sort of crew or mob, right? Organization. So yeah, I just thought like there's something that's off about her character. Everybody else around her seems believable. She doesn't.
Yeah.
She seems arrogant, but and it's fine to be arrogant, except they have the main characters sort of buy into it. And that's where I just don't think that's actually how it would play out in real life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. She's arrogant. She's just, she has taken away from some pretty, I think, significant emotional moments by not reacting how you would expect a child to react, even a child who grew up in like a bad situation. And that there have been a few moments where, like I mentioned, something happens and it's like this, you feel the weight of the emotion of the moment. Like, for instance, when Joel beats that soldier to death when they're trying to escape, the one that he kind of had like a mild friendship with, or at least a professional relationship with. And her reaction is just sort of like, oh, okay. And you would think that she would be like, holy shit, this guy is fucking crazy, and I'm
Right.
like freaked out. Who are these people that I'm with? Because she may or may not see that on a day-to-day basis, but like even though you're like, oh, a perfect example is when they first introduce her, and she's sitting on the ground, she's chained in the room, and she's like, telling them F off, flipping them off, giving them the finger. I'm like, this is a role written for like a teenage boy. Like
or some like battle hardened POW, someone who's she's been chained up for like 4 or 5 days, I think, in the actual story.
Yeah.
It just, I kind of laughed at it. I thought the same thing. Like, this looks like, when Rambo gets caught in Vietnam and they're trying to break him and he just, gives them the finger or something. That's what it was. But they weren't even beating her up. They're like just asking a few random questions. They're obviously observing her, but you just ask her some questions, and like her demeanor is it's just unbelievable, literally unbelievable.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, you want to